My first garden was in 1954. Remember, my father showed me how to plant corn and potatoes, just two things. But I remember the thrill of that. Potatoes, of course, are under the ground. And I remember, like a child waiting for Christmas morning, he says, is it time yet? Is it time yet? And the potatoes under the ground, it's hidden. It's just like a Christmas present wrapped up. And the thrill of that first potato hill being dug out, I always remember that, looking at those beautiful potatoes coming out. And there's nothing, and you know yourself, there's nothing in this world better than new potatoes cooked. We never grow the same thing over and over on a plot. Mm-hmm. That's not to wear the soil out, disease control, pests. Mm-hmm. So we have lots of different things that we grow in rotation. Mm-hmm. Cover crops, flower gardens that bring in beneficial insects. It's a good balance, and it takes a long time to establish that. You don't just do it overnight. Mm-hmm. I remember when it first started, I thought, this is going to be perfect down here because this hadn't been farmed in 30 or 40 years, mm-hmm. as far as row cropping, corn or beans or anything of that nature. Yeah. But when we first started out, I couldn't believe how many pests we had. Mexican bean beetles, mm-hmm. Colorado potato beetles. And the only thing I can think about is that for generations, all of those crops were grown here in Miller's Cove. And I think they were just in the soil, just in the area. Either there, they got an email that there's a brand new garden up the road. My very personal favorite is tomatoes. The ones we raise here have that fabulous flavor. One of my favorite memories was I think it was about 15 years ago. We had a lady here, family brought her here. She was celebrating her 106th birthday. And they brought her down to the garden. Amazing lady. She looked like she was about 70. And I happened to have a long row of the old Ponderosa tomato, and that was introduced in 1889. Mm-hmm. It was one of the forerunners of your beefsteak types today. And I thought, well, this is a good opportunity. Here will be somebody that would remember all that stuff. And I said, ma'am, do you remember the old Ponderosa tomato? And she says, oh, my dear, I haven't thought of that tomato in 85 years. One way I look at myself is, artistically speaking, I would think of myself as Rembrandt's apprentice. Rembrandt's apprentice is down there grinding the colors and stretching the canvas, and the masterpiece gets painted over in the kitchens. In other words, we're doing the raw materials, everything that goes over, and the chefs, they come up with all these beautiful and they're works of art. They are masterpieces. You look at those plates, how they're designed, color and design, placement, it is beautiful work of art. A lot of it's pure luck. To answer that question, I have to go back to 1959, and that was the year, you may have seen the poster in the garden shed, of the William Henry Mowell seed catalog for the year 1913. Mm-hmm. I found that in an abandoned railroad station, the old Ebenezer station west of Knoxville. Okay. And that catalog was filled with these beautiful engravings. Engravings are so precise in detail. Uh-huh. They're still used today because it's so accurate. Mm-hmm. And I started to wonder about all those old varieties. I was gardening at that time, but I'd never been exposed to old varieties. And I started asking people about some of those varieties in there. Some people remembered a few, but others said, well, they're gone. They don't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. And going back to 1959, we had computers, but they were the size of this building we're sitting in right now. Mm-hmm. And there was no networking. Today you can pull out your phone. You can pull out your phone right now and type in old beans of the Appalachian region. Gosh, you'll be half the day you'll be reading what comes up. But we had nothing like that. The best you had was maybe go to the library and hope that you'd find a source on something. But fast forward up to 1990, that's when I became a listed member in the Seed Savers Exchange. The Seed Savers Exchange is the largest nonprofit organization in the world that's conserving genetic diversity on a private basis. And they have a catalog members' catalogs about this thick. It goes from A to Z, apples to zucchini. If a member's got it, it's in there. This year I've got 106 things listed with them. It's amazing how many guests that have come here either were or are farmers, or they have relatives that were, or just plain gardeners. We've gotten a number of seeds here that guests have donated. One that I remember in particular was a very, very small bean, just about that long and narrow, and it was used as for making leather breeches beans. Those beans were made before the days of canning. They would pick those green beans, string them, snap them, take needle and thread, sew up through them, and you'd have a strand about so long, and those were hung on the front porches to dry. So during the winter, you'd reconstitute them. But this being a real small bean, it dried easily, and we've grown that out here. And we had another fellow from Alabama that gave me about, I think, 8 to 10 varieties of old seed from their families down there. But there have been many cases like that. When I first came to Blackberry, I thought, being a relay and chateau resort like this, I thought it'd probably be the last place I would find seeds. I never dreamed that I'd find that, but I was totally off on that. We've had a lot of cases. As seed savers, we do a process called memory banking. For instance, I come to you, we'll say you've got a tomato that's been in the family for 100 years. I want to know, where did that tomato come from? Was it brought from another country, another state? How was it grown? How was it used? Was it a paste tomato, a slicing tomato? Any information you can give, and also some of your family history that would coincide with this variety. And that can be stories, history, things passed down. I think of all of that as like having a chain, say a big chain with no links missing, coming all the way down to present, and all that history in between. This keeps these things alive, and there's what I call a great renaissance going on, because there is a revival of these old varieties. I want to see it continue to grow, especially in awareness, because we have an awareness now. So many people have that they didn't have. You can go back 20 years ago. You mentioned something like Monsanto and GMOs. Most of the people I'd mentioned to that would never heard of it. Today, you can't mention that to anybody that hasn't heard of it, even if they don't know a lot about it. But I like to see that awareness continue to grow and appreciation for it. So many people now have gone back to gardening. You probably know a lot of people that are doing family gardens. During the COVID spell, a lot of people went back to it and have continued doing it, knowing where their food comes from, what real flavor is, and there's a lot of heritage and history that goes with it. You're walking, every time I plant these crops, I feel like I'm walking in the footsteps of my ancestors with those crops that we grow. So over the next 50 years, I'd like to see more and more of that.